Now, I'll be solving some of these study guide questions. These questions would be very, very similar to the test that you're going to have next week. So I would advise that you watch this video to the end. And then if you have any questions, I will be available on Remind to answer your question. Now, let's see the first question we have. So the first question we have is saying that, we have a table. And then in that particular table, notice that the question says that the sequence shown is arithmetic. And then we know that for arithmetic, we will have something called a common difference. So in this case, we have to identify what we have from the table. So from the table real quick, we have my B1 is equals to -4. And then I have my B3 is equals to A. And then I have my B4 is equals to 0.5. And then in this case now, let's write down the formula we're going to use. So the formula I'm going to use in this case, if you remember very well, we have AN is equals to AK plus D into N minus K. And then because the sequence has said that we should have Bn, so I'm just going to change, anywhere I see as B. So I have my Bn is equals to Bk plus D into N minus K. Now I know two things that I could use to find a common difference. So I have my B4 and then I have my B1. So my preference will be that I would love to, put B4 outside, and then, I put B1 inside plus D. In this case, I know my N is 4 and then I know my K is 1. And then in this case, if I substitute what I have, I know from that question, I know my B4 is 0.5 is equals to what is my B1. My B1 in this case will be -4 plus what is 4 minus 1. 4 minus 1 will give me 3, and then I have D. Now if I solve this one-step equation real quick and add 4 to both sides, I will have 4.5 is equals to 3D. And then I find D, and then I notice that I need to divide both sides by 3. And if I do that, I will have my D to be 1.5, which is the same thing as 3 divided by 2. Now if I go back to the formula that I have, which says, my Bn is equals to Bk plus D into N minus K, and then let me get the general term for that sequence, and then I have my Bn is equals to my Bk. In this case, I have used that to be B1, so let me use that to be B1, and then my D, which is 1.5 into N, I don't know what that is, and then my K would be 1. And then in that case, I wanted to find, B3. So B3, let's find B3. So B3 in this case will be my B1 already. I know that one is -4 plus 1.5, 3 minus 1. And then if I do the math, I notice that this one will be -4. And then 3 minus 1 will give me 2. 2 times 1.5 will give me 3. And then if you do the math, this one will give me -1. So the answer to this question is C. Let's move to this next question. So for the next question, it's saying that, if that table, that sequence is geometric. So how are we going to solve this one if it is not arithmetic and then it's geometric? So I will still probably use the same approach, but now I am going to use a different formula. And then the formula that I'm going to use for this one would be my Gn is equals to Gk, then common ratio, exponent n minus k. But in this case, we are using b as our sequence, so I'll just replace g with b. So I have bn is equals to bk r into n minus k. And then in this case now, you notice that I use, I have a value for b4 and then a value for b1. So as my preference again, I would put b4 outside, and then my b1 is going to be inside. Then I don't know what the common ratio is, so let's find the common ratio. And then I notice this one will be 1 minus 4 minus 1, and then my b4 is 0.5 is equals to what is my b1. My b1 is -4, and then I have r divided by r raised to power 3, not divided by 3. So now what I have to do now is to divide both sides by negative 4. So I divide both sides by negative 4. So I have 0.5 divided by negative 4. And then if I divide this one by negative 4, I notice that I will have this one to be negative 0.125. And then once I have that, then I find the cube root of 0.125, and that will give me 0.5, negative 0.5. And probably negative 0.5 is the same thing as negative 1 over 2. And then if I go back to the general formula that we have before, so my general formula that I have before, which says my Gn is equals to Gk r into n minus k, and then Gn is the general sequence I'm trying to find, and then my Gk that I used before, I said that one would be B1, so let me leave that one as B1, and my ratio would be negative 1 over 2, and then I have my n like that minus what is my k? My k is 1. And then in this case, so I have my Bn, so I will replace this with Bn, and then which is equals to what is my B1. So if you go back real quick, you notice that your B1 is negative 4, and then multiply that one with what is your common ratio? You have negative 1 over 2, and then you have n minus 1. And then if you look at that option, that will be option D. And then let's move to the next question, which is question 3. For question 3, all we have to remember is to remember some definitions. And then we notice that you have that function right there, which is exponential. And then they have said that in that form. So they are asking which of the following is true. So if you compare this with this function you're given, you notice that your a is 1 over 3, and then my b is 3 over 2. And then what is 3 over 2 as a decimal? You notice that this one is 1.5, and then which is greater than 1. And then we know that if our a is greater than 0, and then our b is greater than 1, we are going to have something that is called an exponential growth. So this one, we are going to have an exponential growth. And then in that case, you notice that your answer would be option C, because your A, as you said, is greater than 0, and then your B is greater than 1. Let's move to question 4. For question 4, you have that form of exponential function, and then they are asking us for the equivalent of that. So the first thing I want you to do, let's rewrite that function. If I rewrite that function, I have this. And then in that case, all I am going to do in this case is to simplify. So how can I simplify this? So all I will need to do is to do 2 times. And then if you remember the power rule that says that you have 4, and then I can do 4 to the power of 2 multiplied by x. And then you know that this is going to give us 2 times 4 to the power of 2. That is going to give me 16 to the power of x. Now there's nothing I can do at this point, so I will just leave my answer like that, and that's option A. That'll be option A. Is there another way to do this question? Of course, yes. All you have to do is take a number for x. Maybe take x is equal to 0, or maybe x is equal to 2. I would love to use maybe any number greater than 0. So let's use x is equal to 2. So if you put x is equal to 2 right there, you have 2 times 4 to the power of 2 times 2. And then in this case, you have 2 times 4 to the power of 4. And then you simplify this in the calculator and then match it up with anyone that is going to give you that's going to give you the same thing too. You could do that too. Let's move to question 5. For question 5, you have that question right there, and then it's saying that you have this particular graph, and then this question is saying that we should find g of x when we apply this transformation to f. So what am I going to do? The first thing I'm going to do is I would love to make myself a table for the point that was given. So the point that was given was x comma y was 3 comma 4, and then they made a transformation to x. And what will be the transformation to x? So if you go back real quick to x, you notice that that x is inside, and that's horizontal translation. And If something is affecting x, we know that we're going to do the opposite of anything that is affecting it. So in this case, all I need to do, since I'm doing the opposite, I have to, what is the opposite of -2? That will be +2. So I have to add 2 to x. And then, anything that is affecting y, and then this one is called our vertical dilation. Anything that is affecting y, I will just do the exact thing that I saw. So which means my y, all I need to do is to multiply by 3. So if you do that real quick, you notice that we have 3 plus, this one becomes 3 plus 2, and then we have 5. And then this one becomes 3 times 4, and then we have 12. So which means our new transformation now will be 5, 12. And that option for question 5 will be option B. Now for question 6, I want you to be very careful on this question because we're looking for the limit. And then we already know that as x tends to infinity, this one means that, x increases without bound. So we know that x increases without bound. That's what we know. And then you ask yourself again, where can you find, infinity on that number line? So that means, the right of 0 will be a positive number. So that's where I can find, infinity. And then the next thing I wanted to do is I'll probably find a way to simplify that. To simplify that, I can have this one to be 4 multiplied by, 1 over 3. Then multiplied by, I have 1 over 3 to the power of x minus 2. And then if you simplify this further, we notice that this is going to give me, 4 over 3, 1 over 3 to the power of x minus 2. And then if you look at this exponential function real quick, so looking at this exponential function you know for now, you notice that a is greater than 0. And then b, in this case, which means 1 divided by 3 is 0.333. And which means that, my b in this case is between, 0 and 1, which makes this one to be exponential decay. And then if that makes that one to be exponential decay, it means that probably that graph will be, decreasing from left to right. So it's going to look like this. And then if it looks like that, now applying this one right here, which means I want to apply my vertical, shift. And then, my vertical shift or my vertical translation, it means that I am going to take that graph and shift it down 2 units. So which means that this graph right here is going to come down 2 units, which means probably I will have something like, coming down 2 units. This might not be perfect. Let me just draw something coming down 2 units. And then because they want me to find the limit, and then if it's coming down 2 units, which means I have my -2 right there, and then they want me to find the limit would be at that -2. So my limit as s tends to infinity will be at -2. I hope you find this helpful. Let's see how we're going to solve question 7. So for question 7, it's saying that we should determine the exponential function that is increasing and concave down. So in this case, I will quickly jump to the answer to this question, because the answer to this question, if you look at it, the answer will be D. Why is the answer D? So you notice that that negative, in front of that means that, is going to be a reflection across, over the x-axis. So without the negative, what do you notice? You notice that without the negative, the A is positive. Without the negative, you notice that A is positive, right? And then that B is less than, 1, which means 1 divided by 4 will probably be, 0.25. And then and that will be an exponential decay, because it's going to be an exponential decay, which means that this graph initially is probably going to look like this without, the negative sign. As soon as I, apply this negative sign to it, this graph is going to transform to something like this. So it's going to be something like this, because we should have, we should have a reflection over the x-axis. So it's going to look like that. And because it's going to look like that now, that is the only option that is going to satisfy that, statement that they said, which means k should be increasing, that is increasing, and is also concave down. Now let's move to question 8. For question 8, we have an inverse of negative 20 is equals to 7, which means that the function evaluated at 7 will be equals to 20. And then if you look at the answer choice, this 7 is my input and then this is my output. So which means that 7 will mean that I will have 7 hours and then for and 20 gallons. So which one says that? Of course, the answer to this question will be option A. Now let's move to question 9. For question 9, we have something called a residual plot. And then we have a statement that said that, if we did not see a pattern, no pattern, it means that that model is appropriate. So all we should be looking at is the one that does not really have a pattern, and that will be the most appropriate model. So if you look at the linear regression residual plot, you notice that there is a pattern. So this is not appropriate. And then if you look at the exponential one too, you notice that you have a pattern in this one. So that is not appropriate. The only one that is appropriate that we do not have a pattern is quadratic. And then going back to the answer choices, you will notice that the only one that has a quadratic function is option B. What do you notice about A? This is linear. What do you notice about B? This is exponential. And then what do you notice about D? This is log model. And then because of that, we're looking for the one that has exponential, and that will be option B. Now let's move to question 10. For question 10 is saying that if you have a zombie that spread it exponentially. So first of all, I would love to write down my formula, which is that. And then the second thing I will have to identify, I need to identify what is A and then what is B. But if you notice the statement in this case, this one says increases by 100%. So if something increases by 100%, meaning I have to take 100% and add it to 95%. So which makes this one to be 195%. Convert that to decimal, you have 1.95. So in this case, my B, I know what my B is now. So my B is 1.95. And then now I have to find out my A. My A in this case is going to be my initial value, and A is the same thing as the y-intercept. This is same thing as the y-intercept of that graph, and the same thing as my initial value. So my A would be 15. So my A in this case is 15. So if I substitute what I have this to be 15, and then I have my B to be 1.95 to the power of, in this case, instead of using S, they use T. And then if you notice that question says every year, and then they want it to be measured in days, and then we have 365 days in a year. So which means I have to take my function, divide T, and divide it by 365 days, and that would be option D. And then let's go back to question 11. For question 11, the first thing I want you to do for this question is to probably evaluate what you have inside. So I'm going to write the composition of that function in the correct way. So my composition of that function evaluated at 3. So that means that this one is going to look like this. This f is going to stay outside, and then this g is going to stay inside. So all I have to do first is to evaluate g of 3. So let me go ahead and evaluate g of 3. If I evaluate g of 3, I'm going to have that this is 3 times 3 plus 1, and then this one gives me 10. Now I know I have f of g of 3 now is 10. I have to find f of 10. So if I find f of 10, what do you notice? This one becomes what? 10 squared minus 2. And then what is 10 squared? That is 100 minus 2. And that will give me what? 98. And that will be option D. Now let's jump to question 11. For question 11, we have a table. And then in that table, ignore, that noise. That's my 18-month, baby. And then we'll be doing these questions together. So in this question right now, we have, this statement right here. And then that statement means that, both F and G are inverses. That's the meaning of that. So they are inverses. Now, the first thing I have to do, I have to create myself another table. I'll create myself another table. So if I create myself another table, I have X and then I have G of X. So all I have to do now, because I have a table, if I wanted to find the inverse, what do? We switch places. So we have 5, -1, we have -4, we have 2, and then we have 0, we have 5, and then we have 3 and 7. Now what the question asks us to find now is to find G of 5. So what will be my G of 5 from this table? So you look up and then you look down. So and that will give me -1. So for question 12, that would be -1. Now let's go to question 13. For question 13, in this case, they want us to find the average rate of change given that graph of F on this particular interval. So how do you do that? So average rate of change, I'll write that as A is equals to, I always want you to draw a line like this and then take your interval and put it at the denominator. So you have 2, you have -1, and then you subtract those numbers. And then you go to the graph and look at where you have 2 on the graph. This is where I have 2 on the graph. You trace it up. So if you trace it up and trace it to the left, you notice that that one will be 2. Right here will be 2. So on this point, we have 2. And don't forget that we have to put our negative sign. And then I'll go to -1. So I'm going to -1. I will trace that up. If I trace that up, I notice that one will give me 16. So that will be 16. And then in this case now, let's do the math. What is 2 minus 16? That will give me -14. And then if you simplify the denominator, that will give you 3. And let's go to the second question. The second question is saying, using the correct limit, describe the left and right hand behavior. So if you go back to this graph real quick, they wanted us to find the end behavior of this graph. So they want me to find the end behavior of this graph and the end behavior right here too. So what I love to do is to divide my graph into 2 parts. So the left side and then my right side of that graph. So I will start from the left. So my left will mean that my limit, if you look at the left, you have a negative numbers on the left. So which means X is going to approach negative infinity, which means it's going to decrease without bound. Of what? What function? F of X. And that will be equals to what? So if you look at that graph, what is going to happen on this left? You notice that if it decreases without bound, this will be going up forever and it will be going up forever. And that means my answer to this question will be positive infinity. And then basically, if you just look at the graph real quick, you notice that that graph is probably decreasing from left to right, which makes this to be, looking like an exponential decay. So it's looking like an exponential decay. That's the meaning of that graph. And then let's look at what is going to happen to the right. So on the right of that graph, what do you notice? You notice that your limit as S tends to any numbers on the right, they are all positive numbers. So that number means that they would probably increase without bound. So f of x. And then if you notice this graph, on this right of this graph, what do you notice? I notice that, this right of that graph is probably, going to be very close to 0. So which means that this answer to this question would be equals to 0. Will be equals to 0. If you have any question, I would be available on remind to answer your question. Now for the next one, let's go to, it's saying that find the expression for f. In this case, we said that this is exponential decay. So first of all, let me write down the general formula for, an exponential function, which is a b to the x. And then we said that a is our initial value and is also something we call our y-intercept. So this is also called our y-intercept. So if I go back to the graph, where is my y-intercept? My y-intercept is 8. So which makes my a to be equal to 8. And then I have to calculate what is b. So if you look at, if you get yourself a table, so if I get myself a table real quick and do x comma y, you'll notice that at -1, what do you notice? You notice that your y value will be 16. At 0, you notice that your y value will be 8. At x is equals to 1, you notice that your y value will be 4. And then at x equals to 2, you notice that your y value is 2. What do you notice? This is just, dividing by 2. So how do dividing by 2 or multiply by 1 over 2? How do I get from 8 to 4? Multiply by 1 over 2. How do I get from 4 to 2? Multiply by 1 over 2. So which means that my b in this case is my common ratio, which means 1 over 2. Now I have the answer that I'm looking for. All I need to do is substitute. So my a, I have that one to be 8. My b, I have 1 over 2 to the power of x. And that would be what I am looking for. So for my d is saying that if you use this transformation right here, let's write a new expression for f using c. Now, if I use that transformation, what I have from c is this. This is what I have from c. And then if I wanted to apply this transformation, and then for h of x now, if I wanted to apply that transformation, all I need to do, notice that they multiply y by 3. So you multiply y by 3, meaning I will take 3, I will use it to multiply 8, and then I will take my 1 over 2 to the power of x, and then in this case now, what did they do to that x? Just take that and then add 2. And then if you simplify all of this, you have what you have. This one becomes what? 24. And then this I can write it as 1 over 2 to the power of 2. And then I have this one to be 1 over 2 to the power of x. And then in this case, this one becomes 24. And then I have 1 over 2 to the power of 2. I have 1 over 4. And then I have this one to be 1 over 2 to the power of x. And then if I simplify this one real quick, I notice that this one will be 6 to the power of 1 over 2 to the power of x. And that would be my, expression. And let's go to question 14.